Hallelujah indeed. Hello people, this is Mike and welcome to F2F Tech. Today we're going to see how well 11 older NVIDIA and AMD cards hold up in the newly released Far Cry 5. Now we'll be testing all these cards using the low, normal, and high graphics preset, and all of these cards will be tested at 1080p and 720p. Let's not waste any more time and take a look at today's contenders. Alright, let's start things off with the red team, and the first card up is the ASUS Matrix Platinum HD 5870 with 2GB of VRAM. After that we have the PowerColor HD 6870. Moving on we have the XFX HD 6950. And now let's take a look at some 7000 series of cards. Now we have the HD 7770, and this is a Gigabyte variant with 1GB of VRAM. After that we have the HD 7970 GHz edition. This is the reference version of the card. Alright, let's jump over to the green team side of the fence, and kicking things off we have the MSI GTX 470, and after that we have the EVGA GTX 560 Ti with 2GB of VRAM, and then we have the GTX 570 made by EVGA with 2.5GB of VRAM, and the last Fermi card in our roundup is the EVGA classified GTX 590 with a total of 3GB of VRAM with 1.5GB usable by each GPU. And the next card in our lineup is the EVGA GTX 670 for the win, which comes with 2GB of VRAM. And at this point you're probably thinking this is a video sponsored by EVGA, and you're right.
Introducing the EVGA Thermal Pad Edition.
Okay, so the last card in the NVIDIA roundup is the MSI GTX 780 Lightning with that sexy yellow center fan. Alright, well we made it through the list of cards to be benchmarked, so let's take a quick look at the test system. And as you can see, we're not using the 2600K test bed for this benchmark, as I wanted to use the best setup I have to help alleviate any CPU bottlenecks. As far as testing methodology goes, I measured average frame rates and frame times using Fraps. Now I recorded a 55-second run of the built-in benchmark multiple times until I achieved consistent results. I also used the most current drivers for all of the cards tested, except for the HD 5000 and 6000 series of Radeon cards. I used the 15.7.1 drivers, as the 16.2 beta drivers were consistently crashing. I also wanted to mention I list all of the clock speeds for each card, and the cards using GPU boost, I list the actual in-game clocks as well. Alright, well let's jump straight into it. For our first test we are using the low preset at 1080p, and here you can see the GTX 590, 670, and 780, along with the 7970 GHz edition were really the only cards you could say were truly playable. Now the GTX 570 and 7770 were very close to the 30 FPS mark, and I'm sure with a little bit of overclocking they would probably get there. Looking at the 720p results, every card in our roundup was able to hit 30 FPS and higher. The GTX 670 pulls ahead of the GTX 590 a bit more versus a 1080p result, and the 7970 GHz edition is just a monster at both resolutions. Let's move on to the normal preset, and here we can see the average frame rates per second dropped a little bit for each of the cards, but overall it's pretty much the same. Now the 5870 did eke out a small win over the 6950, but it's pretty much within the margin of error. The 720p results show every card can do 30 FPS, except for the HD 6870, but I'm sure with a little overclocking it could get there. Now the GTX 590 is hitting over 60 FPS, but again frame times are not up to snuff when compared to the GTX 670, and again the 7970 GHz edition is just laying waste to everything in its path. The last test today is using the high preset, and here we can see the GTX 590 and up are the only cards to hit above 30 FPS. Now average FPS wise, it's neck and neck with the GTX 670, and the GTX 780 is getting closer to the GHz edition, but it still can't keep up. Everything else is just too slow to call playable. Moving over to the 720p results, we can see the GTX 560 Ti and every card above it is above 30 FPS on average. Even the 5870, GTX 470, and the 6950 are pretty much there as well. With an overclock they would get there. It's not a bad result for most of the cards, though I'd probably stick to the normal preset for actual gameplay. Alright, well that wraps up today's benchmarks, and considering their age, I'd say most of these cards did pretty well. Now this game isn't easy to run, and while it definitely favors GCN architecture, the older Fermi and Terrascale cards did pretty well at 720p. The older Kepler cards look decent next to their older Fermi brethren, but compared to King Tahiti, it's pretty much meh. This isn't the first time we've seen the 7970 take out the GTX 780 in newer titles, but we'll have to revisit this in the future to get a better look. Now I've noticed Far Cry 5 does have some steep VRAM requirements, but it does a great job of allowing spillover into system memory, assuming you have enough. Usually when this happens you'll experience dreadful frame times, but I thought frame times are actually pretty good for the most part. One exception was testing the cards with 1GB of VRAM at 1080p high settings, as in-game large 50 millisecond and beyond spikes were seen often, and textures were extremely muddy and looked pretty terrible, so 1GB cards should stick to low settings. Alright, well that wraps up my look at Far Cry 5 performance with 11 older DX11 video cards. Sorry I haven't produced a video in a while. I started a new job and life's gotten really busy, but that being said, I'll try my best to produce content without taking too much time, but my upload schedule is going to vary quite a bit. Okay, well, if you'd like to support my work on this channel, then please take the time to check out my affiliate links found in the description, and as always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video.